Hi guys, have you ever been in a situation where you're trying to ensure that you break any barrier that is hindering you from effectively negotiating with a customer? This is something that I often encounter in a lot of my sales conversations and a lot of my sales deals. So today I want to actually speak on some of the things that you can do to break that barrier and effectively seal negotiations when you actually go into one. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, I want to encourage you to kindly hit that subscribe button and turn on your notification bell so that you can get lots of useful content from us and continue to encourage a lot more people that this content will benefit. So one of the things that I discover in my sales journey is that a lot of times customers always have a lot of barriers that might hinder you from actually getting to them to be able to actually sell to them. And it's always important as a salesperson or someone who is actually running a business and you want to sell or get deals across to your customers to always ensure that you are able to break that barrier so that your negotiation can be effective and you can get to their needs quickly. So one of the things that I realize is that firstly, when you're trying to break a barrier within a customer, you need to ensure that you listen actively. So I used to think that I was a very good listener up until I started doing my sales job. That I realized that listening itself is a skill, because a lot of times you have the temptation to want to speak even when the person is also talking to you. So I realized that it's always important for you to give the customer ample time to express themselves and say what they have to say before you actually go into that conversation. And so one of the things that I've started doing was that I try as much as possible to capture what the customer is really saying before I intercept them. There was an experience that I had recently where I thought that I was really listening to what my customer had been saying. But I just realized that for a long time, because I've actually been going to see that customer for more than 3-4 times. And one of the things that I realized is that I thought that I really understood what the customer was trying to do. Up until the 4th time, when I was having a conversation with the customer, that was when I was able to really capture the customer's intention. And it was until then that I realized that this was the thing that was always stopping us from being able to move forward in our negotiation, because I realized that I didn't really capture what the customer was intending to do with their research work, because I was trying to sell some products to them, but I didn't really capture what they were trying to do. So after going through that conversation and being able to capture the customer's real intention, that helped me to be able to frame for them something that really worked. The other thing that you need to do when trying to break barrier is to understand the customer's interest. So if you've been able to listen actively, it will be easy for you to understand the customer's interest. Because a lot of times when customers come to you, there's something that you are thinking about that they want to actually do. There's always a need behind the need. For example, my customer's need behind her need was not that she wanted to buy that product. What she wanted to do was to get a reliable source for what she was doing, because she needed to be reproducing, some level of work for what she was trying to do. So she was trying to send out some work to people even outside the UK. And so what she was trying to do is that she wanted to get a reliable supply for that product. So that was the real need. So it wasn't that she didn't have a supplier before, but she was looking for someone who was reliable, so that by the time she starts that work, there will be no need for her to actually, be bothered about, being able to get supply. So that was the real need behind what she wanted to really buy. And so I was able to capture that interest while listening actively. Then the third thing that you need to do if you want to break barrier is to build rapport. And this is something that I always ensure to do. When I go into a conversation with a customer, before even talking about business, I try to actually break the ice by getting into random conversations, just talking about random things, just to be able to get them to be more comfortable with myself. For example, I could talk about how their weekend was, if they did any fun or interesting thing during the weekend, just to ensure that the customer actually feels a bit relaxed, before we go into that conversation. And that always helps, when you want to actually further go into a negotiation with a customer, because they already feel more relaxed with yourself. And so what are the things you need to consider when you want to go into a negotiation? One of the first things that you need to consider when going into a negotiation is to research about the customer. A lot of times, what I try to do is that before I go into speaking to some customers, I try to check up if I can find any interesting fact about them online, or about the things that they are doing, or about their organization, just to have an understanding of what I'm going to be saying when I get there. Because sometimes when you go to speak to some customers, you might not have a lot of time to even speak to them. And so you might need to actually go straight to the point. And when you are talking to a customer, from your first line of introduction, they would actually know if you've actually done a bit of research on them or not. And it's always important for you to have a bit of knowledge about the customer, so that even when you are trying to pitch a particular product to them, you know that this is something that the customer might or will be interested in because of what you are currently doing. And so that always helps as well. Then the other thing that you want to do is to try and ask open-ended questions. So this is very important when you're trying to understand a lot more about what is driving a customer to go with a particular product or service. You have to ask questions like, what are you trying to do? Why do you want to try and do this thing? When are you looking at doing this thing? How do you want to do this thing? So things that will ensure that the customer is able to speak and talk through what they want to do, so that you can effectively capture their interest and their intention. And that is how you're going to be able to know what to speak to. So for example, if a customer's real interest is that they are looking for something that can help them save time. So when you ask questions like, so what are you trying to do and how do you want to do them? When the customer fully explains to you what they are trying to do, then you understand that, okay, from everything that this customer is saying, what they really want to do is that they are looking for a solution that can help them save time. Not necessarily the solution. The solution is important, but ultimately what will change the direction of this conversation is if you are able to give them a solution that will help them save time. So you get that when you ask a customer open-ended question and they are able to fully express themselves and say the things in their mind. Then the third thing that you need to do is to ensure that you should be open towards getting a win-win bargain. So when you're going into a negotiation, you should not be thinking about you being the one to win, because if you're thinking of you being the one to win, then the customer is not going to be happy with you after a while. So you must be thinking about striking a balance between how you're able to win and how the customer is able to win. So if it's in terms of pricing, if it's in terms of quality, if it's in terms of what the customer is looking for, you must be able to ensure that you are able to bring in all those things so that the customer knows that when you are talking about the price or anything, the customer knows that he's getting value for what you are actually trying to sell to them. And so at the end of that conversation, even when you go into price negotiation, the customer should also know that is also, winning. Not that when the customer is mentioning a price, you're mentioning a price and you don't want to shift ground, and the customer is saying, oh, but I have actually shifted ground. So you must be willing to actually be open so that the customer and yourself are able to leave that negotiation table with a win-win bargain. Then the last thing that I want to say is that you must also not be in a situation where you are too desperate that you cannot walk away. There are some times that you go into a negotiation and you might be the one that might be losing. And so in that situation, you must be willing to walk away, because not every negotiation would always lead into a sale. There are times that you might need to walk away, and I've actually done that a lot of times. There are times that you're trying to sell a product to a customer, and either, first of all, maybe your product doesn't even meet with the specification that the customer wants to buy. You must be willing to walk away, because you trying to force your product on the customer would actually make the customer not to be happy with you. So in that situation, just walk away. Or you are in a situation where you are trying to sell to a customer, and what the customer wants to pay is lower than actually what you're actually buying that product for. And so in that situation, it might not even pay you at all. And if you have gone up and down and you have actually had that conversation with the customer and the customer is not willing to change their budget, you might need to walk away in that situation. And that doesn't mean that that relationship has ended. It just means that that conversation or that product or what you're trying to offer to the customer is far beyond what they are willing to pay, and you must be willing to walk away. But one thing you must note is that even when you walk away, you must still ensure that you keep that relationship, because the same customer who did not buy from you today might be the one that might come to buy from you. Because I've seen situations where I've actually tried to sell to the customer, we've had a conversation, we've negotiated, and the customer just comes back and tells me that, oh, by the way, they got a cheaper product from somebody else and they think they'll be going with that person. And when I ask them, so how much are you looking at? And they mention the price. And I actually let them know that, okay, based on what you have said, it's far lower than even our cost price. It might be difficult for us to actually sell this to you. But feel free to reach out to me if you need my help and any other solution, because that is what is more important, because sales is a continuous thing. And so I want to believe that everything I've shared today has actually made a lot of sense. And I believe that if you actually practice some of these things, you would see a lot of improvement in your negotiations. If you're yet to subscribe to this channel, I want to encourage you to hit that subscribe button and do share this with a lot of people that you know this topic would actually benefit. I also want to mention that we offer a one-to-one training on sales mastering, or on how you can effectively, structure sales in your company or in your business. And we also do like a group training if you want to train your salespeople. So please reach out to us if you actually want us to actually help you. Thank you so much for staying tuned to today's video. See you next time.